Sports Talk Chicago. Here with Jon Zaghloul, and we're back and ready for today's special guest. He's the White Sox Beat Writer for MLB.com and a BBWAA member. Please welcome Scott Merkin to the program. Scott, great to have you on. How are you?
Good to see you, John. Happy to be back on.
Yeah, great to have you back on. What's wrong with the White Sox right now?
Well, they're out of contention for the AL Central title. That would be the biggest thing. And, aside from that, I just think it just never was a team that clicked all year. I don't know if it's not a great fit. It's funny because I've talked a little bit about everything. And the 2004 team, Ozzie Guillen's first year, had great talent on that team. You had Maglio, you had Frank, you had Carlos Lee. Now they had huge injuries. Maglio, they were in first place at one point. And then Maglio got hurt, Frank got hurt, and they, tailed off, and Minnesota won the division. But that next team in 05, now granted, they did everything right. The pitching was amazing. We'll never see what they did in the ALCS again, the 4 straight complete games, and I think 2/3 of an inning from 5 straight complete games. And great defense, hit a lot of home runs, but they had a great fit on that team. They changed the team. They let Maglio go. They traded Carlos Lee. They changed the look. And I think it's not always about having the most immense talent in every position. It's about a team that fits well together. And no better example of that than Cleveland. So, I'm not sure, I think I speak for the beat writers. We all enjoyed covering Tony this year and last year, but I don't know if he was the right fit for this team or is the right fit for this team moving forward. So just a bunch of everything. And they just never were, I predicted before I went on vacation at the beginning of September, I wrote about it in my newsletter for tomorrow. I predicted how when they got back from Seattle, Oakland, they're going to be at the worst tied for first place because they were on a roll. Cleveland was coming off 2-8 stretch, including a 4-game losing streak where they scored 1 run, not 1 run a game, 1 run in total in 4 games. So I thought Minnesota's hurt. Cleveland has been a great story, but they're too young. They're not going to have the fight at the end. And lo and behold, Cleveland has gone 18-3. And I was wrong. And the Sox just, the only thing that I guess I missed is that the Sox never wore a great team this year. They were between 5 under and 5 over and somewhere between, 6 out and 2 out almost the entire year. They had a 10-day stretch early on where they were in first, but otherwise that was it. So I think, AJ Pierzynski once told me this, and I'm sure other baseball people have said it, but the record don't lie. You are what your record is, and they're a 1 game below 500 team right now.
Why did this happen? I don't think anybody expected what we saw from them this year. They were supposed to be a World Series team to a lot of people.
Right.
Why did this happen to the White Sox?
Well, I think people don't want to hear it, but it's not an excuse. It's fact. There were a lot of injuries. Moncada going into last week, getting ready for spring training, hurts his oblique and probably, is not lined up right the rest of the year. Lucas Giolito hurt himself in the very first start against the Tigers. He had an off year after that. Grandal was dealing with off-season knee surgery, and had other injuries. And while being a good force in that clubhouse, a good leader, you saw that in New York with, situation with him and Josh Donaldson after the TA moment on the field, just had a bad year. He underperformed, and I don't think I'm saying anything that he probably wouldn't say overall too. He's, he got a 275 slugging percentage after when he came back last season. I don't think there was a ball that he hit that wasn't well connected. Even the outs were like, geez, that one's close to going out. He just crushed everything. So, I just think it was a little bit of everything. It just didn't work. Whatever the group was together this year just did not work, whether it was injuries, underperformance. And, don't take away from Cleveland. Cleveland was the better team. Cleveland had its back against the wall in the sense of maintaining that first place lead. They went 18-3. And a lot of those games were against the Twins and the Sox, who were the 2 contending teams. Terry Francona, we all kind of rolled our eyes a couple Thursdays ago when they had that makeup game, and he went with Hunter Gaddis. No disrespect to Hunter, but he's a rookie who didn't figure to match up very well at the Sox, and he didn't. He gave up, I think, 5 home runs in that game, 4 or 5, and backed up Tristan McKenzie. Well, I don't think they've lost since that game. If my math is right, I believe. Oh, no, they lost once to Minnesota. So they were 4-1 versus Minnesota, 3-0 versus the Sox, 3-0 versus the Rangers. So I'm going to say Terry Francona's move worked out really well there. And, I think the White Sox also, which, isn't a great look, but it's kind of understandable. They wouldn't say it, but they went into that Cleveland series knowing they had to sweep to win, to have a chance at winning the division. Even 2 out of 3 would keep them alive, but it would make it still tough with, as few games as there were. And I think once they lost that Tuesday game, which was a battle, both teams had chances to win, and Cleveland ended up putting it away with 5 in the 11th. It just kind of took a little bit of a win. It kind of was a gut punch. And, you would not expect them to get swept by Detroit, period, let alone at home. So a very tough week to end a very tough season for the White Sox.
What made Cleveland the better team over the White Sox? Because again, we didn't expect that early
Yeah.
on.
Oh, no, I think if you went back and looked at all the preseason picks, there'd be many more that picked them last than first. I mean, many more. I don't know if anyone would have picked them first. I think people thought Minnesota. I thought Minnesota because I thought they were nowhere near as bad as what happened last year. Minnesota, I believe, I was sitting next to Ray Garcia of the White Sox media relations, and we were going over the list of the Twins on the IL. I think there's like 19 guys. This is going to be. I remember the lineup they had. This is again taking nothing away from Zach Stewart, but the lineup they had years ago where he almost threw a perfect game. He took it into the 8th inning. I think they had 2 starters in that entire lineup, and you're going to see a little bit of that these next 6 of the final 9. You know, Polanco's gone, Buxton's gone, Kepler's gone, Kirilov's gone. The list goes on and on. It's sad for them, but Cleveland just had the right mix. You know, they're a great defensive team. They catch everything. They take the extra base every single time. They play hard every moment. You know, even the play that I think it was game 2 where Rosario, who's I think one of the faster guys in the American League, hits sort of a slow roller Moncada. Moncada says he tried to get it on the right hop, so it didn't become a tricky play. Took a second too long. Rosario beat it out, and they end up getting 2 runs in that first inning when Moncada makes an error a couple plays later. So, yeah, I don't know. But they had injuries like we went over. You know, every team had them, but they had quite a few. But then again, the Twins are probably saying, you know, don't look at me. But back to the Guardians, you know, I think the Twins were a team that were in. I think the Tigers, because they finished 61-53 last year after a really bad start, and they were miserable. They were awful this year. And the Guardians just played well. And I really like that team overall. Like, I think they can beat either the Rays or the Guardians. I'm sorry, or the Mariners, barring a complete collapse by the Mariners in the first round. I think the Blue Jays will probably end up being that 4th seed. But, I mean, they have a really good front 3 in Bieber, McKenzie. Ask the Sox hitters about McKenzie. He has been outstanding against them. And Cal Quantrill's had a great year. And Cal Quantrill's invincible at home. I don't believe he's lost a home start in his entire tenure with the Guardians. So that's your probably game 3 pitcher if you get to that in the series. You have probably, you know, coin flip between Clase and Hendricks is the best closer probably in baseball right now. Karinchak has been great as a setup guy. I believe his name is DeSantos. Trevor Stephen, you know, they got a good bullpen and they have a good mix. They don't hit a lot of homers, so I don't know if that's going to change things, you know, in a playoff game. But I think, you know, you want to make things happen. It's a Cleveland team, and they have, of course, multi-championship winner and experienced manager in Terry Francona.
Scott Merkin here on Sports Talk Chicago. Scott, what are you hearing about Tony La Russa moving forward for the White Sox?
I mean, I'm hearing, you know, everything, but pretty much the only thing I know is what Rick Hahn has told us, you know, and that he's not coming back the rest of this year. I asked Rick on Saturday when he talked to us before the game after Michigan had won. Both Rick and I are Michigan people, actually, so I had to put that in there. I'm required by contract to do that. He said, you know, I asked him, will he come back next year? No, Rick actually jumped ahead of this and said, I know the inevitable, and we're focused on the rest of the season at this point. We'll talk about Tony at the end of the year. And I later then asked him, has he expressed a desire that he wants to come back next year? Who knows? You know, he's going to be 78 soon. He's done everything you possibly can as a manager and then some. You know, 3 world titles, 6 pennants, number 2 all time in wins, and really number 1 because Connie Mack has won, and Connie Mack owned a lot of the teams that he managed. So just, you know, continuously made himself manager. And Rick said, we're focused on his health, and that's it, which is understandable. It's understandable. I personally think, you know, again, enjoyed covering Tony. They probably need a new voice in there. And again, I don't know if they need to reconfigure this team, as many people are yelling, we need a different look, but I do think they have to go through each spot and figure out what works and what doesn't work and what works together moving forward.
What do you think works for them right now? Who should they be retaining moving forward?
Well, I mean, you can make an argument that it can retain a lot of these guys. I mean, Eloy Jimenez is showing you when he's healthy, he's a 300 hitter with 40 home run potential. Luis Robert, when he's healthy, which he was not a lot of this year, is probably, you know, has the talent to be an MVP candidate. Obviously, you've got to do it on the field too. I mean, Yasmani Grandal, we talked about, he's got 1 year left on his contract. When he came back from his knee issue last year, just line drives and home runs and extra base hits everywhere. Not the case this year. You know, the big issue is going to be Jose Abreu. Jose Abreu is, you know, his last year in this 3-year, I believe it was $50 million extension. He is, you know, as valuable a piece of the franchise as I've seen in recent memory. I mean, obviously, Konerko is great, and Frank Thomas is great, and Chris Sale on the mound. I'm missing people because you can go on and on. But Jose is in that category. Jose is absolutely in that category. I think he'd love to win with the White Sox, but you know what? Chris Sale wanted to win with the White Sox, and they had to move on from him, had to trade him. So the thing is, Andrew Vaughn, if Jose Abreu comes back, is going to probably be an outfielder again. And Andrew has worked his butt off, as is Gavin Sheets, learning the outfield. Andrew Vaughn's not a Gold Glove outfielder, so he's probably a better fit at first base. But if you have Jose back there, even if you split time, he's still going to be in the outfield some. So I think they need probably another left-handed bat to kind of balance that out a little bit. And, better defense, whatever that entails. And that may mean moving Vaughn to first base and somehow parting ways with Jose, which would be tough for the organization. It would be tough for everyone involved. He's such a good man. It would really be tough to see him go. And this is not a sentimental thing. The guy has been great this year. His power numbers and RBI numbers. I remember for a while, though, he was like the guy in the lineup, So, Vaughn was there, Sheets was there. But in terms of like reputation, that's the guy you're going to try and pitch around and not give anything to hit. And he probably pressed a little bit to try and make things happen. But he's still, I think, fifth in the batting race. So it's not like he's tailed off where you're like, well, we're going to keep him, but we're expecting like, minimal OBP production and that kind of thing. He's near a career high for that. So it'll be an interesting decision there. There's contractual concerns with a lot of these guys in terms of Moncada, if for some reason, and now let's let's get this straight. Moncada is one of the better defensive third basemen, I think, in the game. He's not Nolan Arenado, but no one is. But, he's really good. And he's had an off year offensively. He's had a really poor year offensively. But he also, I believe, has like $45 million owed to him over the next couple of years. I should look that up. But he's, that's not an easy contract to move if you somehow decide to do that. So, again, I don't think you run it back completely as is. But I think if you bring a lot of these guys back, the same guys who won the division in 21, the same guys who won it in 20, every year is different. As we can all speak, even those of us who aren't baseball players, every year you feel a little different, you get a little older, but I still think it's a team that can be, very competitive and contend for a division title.
What about at manager? I think that's going to be the bigger question too. Do they make a change at manager? If so, who are you hearing, or who do you think would be a good fit?
Well, I think there haven't been many names out there yet because they haven't, announced really the Tony situation yet. So I don't know. It depends what you want to go for. Do you want to go for an older, more established guy like a Bruce Bochy, even like a Mike Scioscia? Do you want to go young? Justin Jerschley managed the Project Birmingham in Birmingham. Chris Getz, who I think is more on the line as GM, could be it. Or how about guys who are extraordinarily knowledgeable baseball guys with ties to the organization? AJ Pierzynski, Jim Thome. There's so many guys out there. I think it'd be a good job. Yeah, I think that's one of the reasons Tony, besides the connection to Jerry Reinsdorf and the connection to the organization, like this job so much, because as a manager, ask AJ Hinch, you don't come into teams very often where you can win a title as soon as you step foot on the property. You got to go through a little bit before you get there. So that's what you're coming into with the Sox, unless for some reason, which I don't see it happening, they decide to just completely tear it down and change things again. You're coming in with a team at the very least that should contend for an AL Central title.
Has there been talk about Miguel Cairo inheriting the job? How have you evaluated his job so far?
Yeah, I should. I forgot about Miguel Cairo. He's obviously done an outstanding job filling in for Tony. And I think things have gotten tough after they lost that first game. But I liked his. I'm sorry. I'm looking up. I want to get it right. Yohan Moncada, real quickly, in 23 is owed $17 million. 24, he's owed $24 million, and then a club option of 25 for 25. So that's what we're talking about. So there's always contractual concerns. Anyways, back to the manager, and I did forget Miguel Cairo, put in a very tough situation. It was an hour before that game on August 30th against Kansas City where Tony left. He did the pregame. He was talking to Dave Stewart on the field. He talked to, I believe, Jesse Rogers about Albert Pujols before going to the clubhouse. And then we got a group of us were having dinner in the Bards room, and we got a text saying, Tony's not managing tonight. And he, aside from being there for Dave Stewart's retirement ceremony and then being there for the 2 Colorado games at home, we haven't really seen him since then. So it's a tough situation for Cairo. He gets asked a lot about that, obviously, can only answer what he knows, but I think he's done a good job. So I think, again, he would be in the mix. Absolutely. I don't think it would be automatic that if Tony didn't come back, they would just give the job to Miguel, despite him doing a very nice job. But I would find it hard to believe he wouldn't be in the mix.
How much of a mental toll do you think that took on the White Sox down the stretch, having to change managers and wondering if Tony's ever going to come back?
I don't think it took that much of a toll. I think they probably knew more than we did, in the media, in the public. And, they played very well at start. I think they won 6 straight series, and then they hit this week where they just, fell down against Cleveland, as they did a lot this year. Not a lot, but they lost what it was 12-7 was the series edge. And then the one team in the AL Central they dominated, the Tigers, they just, couldn't get anything against them this weekend. So I don't think it's so much the toll of Tony, who, was their leader. That a lot of people, people have talked about him as, they miss him and, he was a part of the team. But I think it was more about fight, and then it stopped. Reality kind of set in. When they lost to Cleveland, they're like, okay, we've lost the tiebreaker. We're down 5 games now. And I think it just kind of hit them, and Cleveland just ran with it. Now, one side note, and this is, again, part of the miracle, they do have the tiebreaker over both Seattle and Tampa. I don't think it's going to matter, but if it comes to that, they do have the title. So if miracles do happen, if the absolute biggest miracle in baseball history does happen, they would have the tiebreaker over both of them.
We talked about that before we got on. What are the Sox have to go 8-1? Is that it? The Mariners have to go.
I think they have to go 8-1, facing Minnesota 6 times, who is, torn apart by injury, but, going to play for pride, I would think, and then facing San Diego in San Diego, who needs every win for seeding in the wild card. So it's not like they're going to be benching guys. Meanwhile, Texas, here's where the theory falls apart. Texas has 3 at home Seattle has 3 at home against Texas, 3 at home against Oakland, and 4 at home against Detroit. If Seattle cannot win, the magic number, the elimination number for the Sox is 3. If Seattle cannot win 3 of those 10 games, they do not deserve to be in the postseason in that case. So, yeah, I mean, they struggled this last week, or these last 10 games. They were at Anaheim, at Oakland, at Kansas City, and lost all 3 series. But again, I'm talking more about Seattle. The Sox are not going to make the playoffs. That's not going to happen. They're not going to go 9-0. And we can come back and revisit this if somehow they do. But, it's just the one thing, just being factual. The one thing that's still alive is they are not officially eliminated. The Boston Red Sox, they're eliminated. They are not going to playoffs. Sox have this elimination number of 3, but, that could be over by Wednesday night for all we know.
How much of a failure would you characterize this 2022 season for the White Sox?
Probably the most disappointing team I've covered in terms of, not for me, in terms of their results. 06 was a very good team. There was not the extra wild card, and they lost to 2 Detroit was unbelievable until like the end of September. And Minnesota, I think, finished 36-10 that year. There were some other teams in there that, led for a while. Even my first team, 03, I think had a lead up until like the last 3 weeks. The first year Robin Ventura managed, they had a 3 or 4 game lead in September and they blew it. But in terms of expectations, whether they were right or wrong, this team had gone to the playoffs 2 years in a row. It was 1 win away in 20 from being the 2 seed in those playoffs. Was a division champion last year in the AL Central. So, this shouldn't have happened. Just on paper, this should not have happened. And I talked to Rick Hahn the afternoon before they lost to Houston 21-5 or whatever the heck that final score was. And he readily said it. I think it was in my newsletter that he said, if we don't make it, there are a lot of people around here, they're going to be very disappointed. And so there's no reason hiding that. There's no reason lying about that, because they will. I mean, obviously, at the very least, this team knew it should have been a playoff team. So yeah, I've covered the team for 20 years, and I might be missing one, but really probably the biggest downer for the organization in terms of what ultimately happened.
Is there any hope we see something different next year?
Yeah, I mean, they have a lot of guys locked in, and there's some guys locked in at some pretty sizable numbers. So I'm not sure if they're going to go out and spend wildly, but I think they'll add on. And you also have, a couple of young guys in there. Oscar Colas could be up next year, which gives you the left-handed bat. So maybe they go out and get someone who can, spend some time in right field until Colas is officially ready, and then also play a part on that team even after he's up there. But yeah, I think there will be some changes. I don't think you can avoid changing. I think if you do, it's kind of putting your head in the sand. Again, I don't think they believe, and I've talked to some people, that this team is a disaster and they have to refocus everything and, go into the laboratory and drop a whole new plan. But I think they also understand, after watching what happened to them and what Cleveland did, you can't come back exactly the same. You have to make some changes, some adjustments to be better set for 2023 and beyond.
Scott Merkin, still here on Sports Talk Chicago. Scott, 2 more questions before we finish up. First off, your reaction to Albert Pujols' 700th home run was what?
Amazement, because we were sitting in the I saw the 699 on replay. We were still in the press box. We were sitting in the post-game interview in the Conference and Learning Center and waiting for Cairo to come in. And Vinny Duber of CHGO, I don't know if you pronounce that or just spell it out, turned to me and said, Pujols just homered. And I'm like, yeah, he had 699. He goes, no, he had 700. I'm like, you're kidding me. I said, first of all, it seemed like he was just up like 5 minutes before. So I thought maybe Major League Baseball done a special thing where Pujols could hit 2 or 3 times through the lineup to make sure he got to 700. But it really was, he had just gotten back around that quickly. And it's a great story. I mean, like I talked to Abreu about him, who's good friends with Pujols. La Russa holds Pujols in the highest of esteem and has always compared him to Abreu. So that should tell you a little bit about Abreu too. But, Abreu and Pujols are friends. Cairo played with Pujols for 3 years, talked to him about, Pujols, have a little bit on in the newsletter about that. And I mean, just unbelievable. I mean, who would have thought the second half? I mean, his second half, probably, I don't have the numbers in front of me, got to be up there in the top 5 in baseball, right? At what he's done. I mean, I wonder if he's even, I asked Abreu, I said, do you really think he's retiring next year? And he said, through Billy Russo, we don't talk about that. So who knows, but amazing. I mean, what, 4 all time, right?
Yep.
Bonds, Aaron, Ruth, Pujols, pretty good company. And I think in terms of 700 homers and 3,000 hits, it's just Pujols and Aaron, right? So there you go. I mean, nothing more. It's just an amazing accomplishment.
Scott, before we finish up today, last question. Can you tell me about the time this year you won Mega Millions, or you got a winning ticket?
I think I won. Well, actually, I think I won. I only play when it's like huge amount, as in like, the money I spend on Diet Pepsi wouldn't help me if I put it towards lottery and won like 8 million as opposed to 800 million. Like 8 million would be a nice little shot in the arm too. But I played when it was up to like 1.2 billion at the 7-Eleven in my building. And 2 things. One, I got back the money I put in. I think I won $20. But the first time I went, it was too late to get it at the counter, so you had to go through the machine. And the machine only took $10, and I only had 20s in my wallet. So I put the 20 in, played 10 on the Mega Million, and I had to play 10 on another thing. So I picked this crossword. I'm not a lottery aficionado. I picked this crossword thing where you had to like rub things off in it, and it showed what you won. And I ended up getting like 4 matches. So I knew that was $20. I'm like, okay, I made whatever I spent. And then I didn't realize I forgot to rub off the multiplier. So I went to the counter, and the young woman rubbed off the multiplier, and she had this big look on her face, and she's like, you won $200. And I'm like, I thought you were gonna tell me I won 10,000. She goes, but 200 is good. And I'm like, yeah, it's good. So that was my big win in lottery play this year. I'm ahead of the game in my lottery winning so far this year for sure.
Well, Scott, thank you so much for joining me. Always a pleasure to talk White Sox with you. Best wishes as this season comes to a close, and looking forward to catching up in the offseason. Hopefully a lot of moves for the White Sox going into next year.
Thanks, John. Anytime, and let me know when you need me again. Good talking to you.